Real-Time 1960s presents Evening Report, a complete roundup of today's news with Joe Rubenstein.
Good evening. In Tuscaloosa, the University of Alabama is integrated. In Mississippi, a civil rights leader is assassinated. In Saigon, a Buddhist monk sets himself on fire. President Kennedy talks peace, New Yorkers talk Cleopatra, and the Yankees and Dodgers are on the rise. Those are the headlines. The details after this message.
Two great cars are coming from Dodge, the dependables, in two sizes.
If you like 'em tough, quick, smart, see your Dodge dealer.
Two great cars are coming from Dodge.
See 'em October 2nd.
The dependables, in two new sizes.
At 5:30 p.m. in Tuscaloosa yesterday, Governor George Wallace's defiance of a federal court order to integrate the University of Alabama crumbled when he was confronted by federalized National Guard troops. Two Negro students, James Hood and Vivian Malone, both 20, enrolled shortly thereafter. There was no violence, but the governor, standing at the schoolhouse door as promised, did not make the process easy. Earlier, at 1 p.m., Mr. Wallace had refused a personal request by Deputy Attorney General Nicholas Katzenbach that he allow the two students to enter Foster Auditorium and register. Governor Wallace, flanked by state troopers, replied to Mr. Katzenbach's request with a statement.
As Governor and Chief Magistrate of the state of Alabama, I deem it to be my solemn obligation and duty to stand before you, representing the rights and sovereignty of this state and its peoples. The unwelcomed, unwanted, unwarranted, and force-induced intrusion upon the campus of the University of Alabama today of the might of the central government offers frightful example of the oppression of the rights, privileges, and sovereignty of this state by officers of the federal government. Now, therefore, I, George C. Wallace, as governor of the state of Alabama, do hereby denounce and forbid this illegal and unwarranted action by the central government.
Mr. Katzenbach, who was accompanied by two federal marshals, responded to the governor's statement.
I take it from that statement that you are going to stand in that door and that you are not going to carry out the orders of this court, and that you are going to resist us from doing so. Is that correct?
I stand upon the statement.
Stand upon that statement. Governor, I'm not interested in a show. I don't know what the purpose of the show is. I am interested in the orders of these courts being enforced. I would ask you once again to responsibly step aside, and if you do not, I'm going to assure you that the orders of those courts will be enforced. Two students who simply seek an education on this campus are presently on the campus. They have a right to be here, protected by that court order. They have a right to register here, and those students who remain on this campus, they will register today, and they will go to school at this university at this summer session. The university has indicated its willingness to accept them. From the outset, Governor, all of us have known that the final chapter of this would be the admission of these students. I ask you once again to reconsider the consequences of your statement, and I'll ask you once again, will you give me the assurance that you will step aside and peacefully do your duty?
Governor Wallace did not step aside. Mr. Katzenbach did not bring Mr. Hood and Miss Malone, who were waiting in a nearby car, to confront the governor. Instead, the two students were taken directly to their dormitories. Mr. Katzenbach then called President Kennedy to inform him that Governor Wallace, as expected, had ignored the president's cease and desist order contained within a presidential proclamation issued last week because the proclamation had no legal force. After the call, President Kennedy issued an executive order, which had already been prepared, authorizing the federalization of the Alabama National Guard under the Insurrection Act of 1807. At 5:30, Major General Henry Graham, in command of the federalized guardsmen, approached and saluted Governor Wallace, who had remained at Foster Auditorium. The general said, quote, "Sir, it is my sad duty to ask you to step aside under the orders of the President of the United States," unquote. Before complying, Governor Wallace issued a final statement.
We are winning in this fight because we are awakening the American people to the dangers that we have spoken about so many times, which is so evident today, the trend toward military dictatorship in this country. We shall now return to Montgomery for the purpose of continuing this fight because we are winning. We shall continue to work for a better Alabama, for all the people of this state, both white and Negro. And it is my prayer that God above shall bless all the people of this state, both white and black.
A short time later, the newly registered Vivian Malone was asked for a statement on the day's events.
Well, I would just like to say that I'm glad that the registration is over and everything is over now. I think we can get down to studying. This is our main purpose here, and I'm glad that it has all been over now, and all we have to do now is go get our books and start studying. That's all.
At 8 o'clock last night, President Kennedy delivered a nationally televised speech on the civil rights issue.
This afternoon, following a series of threats and defiant statements, the presence of Alabama National Guardsmen was required on the University of Alabama to carry out the final and unequivocal order of the United States District Court of the Northern District of Alabama. That order called for the admission of two clearly qualified young Alabama residents who happened to have been born Negro. That they were admitted peacefully on the campus is due in good measure to the conduct of the students of the University of Alabama, who met their responsibilities in a constructive way. Today we are committed to a worldwide struggle to promote and protect the rights of all who wish to be free. And when Americans are sent to Vietnam or West Berlin, we do not ask for whites only. It ought to be possible, therefore, for American students of any color to attend any public institution they select without having to be backed up by troops. It ought to be possible for American consumers of any color to receive equal service in places of public accommodation, such as hotels and restaurants and theaters and retail stores, without being forced to resort to demonstrations in the street. And it ought to be possible for American citizens of any color to register and to vote in a free election without interference or fear of reprisal. It ought to be possible, in short, for every American to enjoy the privileges of being American without regard to his race or his color. But this is not the case.
The president said the nation faced a moral crisis as a result of the rising tide of Negro discontent.
We are confronted primarily with a moral issue. It is as old as the scriptures and is as clear as the American Constitution. The heart of the question is whether all Americans are to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunities, whether we are going to treat our fellow Americans as we want to be treated. If an American, because his skin is dark, cannot eat lunch in a restaurant open to the public, if he cannot send his children to the best public school available, if he cannot vote for the public officials who represent him, if, in short, he cannot enjoy the full and free life which all of us want, then who among us would be content to have the color of his skin changed and stand in his place? Who among us would then be content with the counsels of patience and delay? 100 years of delay have passed since President Lincoln freed the slaves, yet their heirs, their grandsons, are not fully free. They are not yet freed from the bonds of injustice. They are not yet freed from social and economic oppression. And this nation, for all its hopes and all its boasts, will not be fully free until all its citizens are free. We preach freedom around the world, and we mean it. And we cherish our freedom here at home. But are we to say to the world, and much more importantly, to each other, that this is a land of the free, except for the Negroes, that we have no second-class citizens, except Negroes, that we have no class or caste system, no ghettos, no master race, except with respect to Negroes? We face, therefore, a moral crisis as a country and a people. It cannot be met by repressive police action. It cannot be left to increase demonstrations in the streets. It cannot be quieted by token moves or talk. It is a time to act in the Congress, in your state and local legislative body, and above all, in all of our daily lives.
Finally, the president announced that he would send Congress sweeping legislation to expedite the integration of schools and to open public facilities to every American, regardless of race.
Other features will be also requested, including greater protection for the right to vote. This is one country. It has become one country because all of us and all the people who came here had an equal chance to develop their talents. We cannot say to 10% of the population that you can't have that right. Your children can't have the chance to develop whatever talents they have. That the only way that they're going to get their rights is to go in the street and demonstrate. I think we owe them and we owe ourselves a better country than that. Therefore, I'm asking for your help in making it easier for us to move ahead and to provide the kind of equality of treatment which we would want ourselves. We have a right to expect that the Negro community will be responsible, will uphold the law, but they have a right to expect that the law will be fair, that the Constitution will be colorblind, as Justice Harlan said at the turn of the century. This is what we're talking about, and this is a matter which concerns this country and what it stands for. And in meeting it, I ask the support of all of our citizens. Thank you very much.
Afterward, Ralph McGill, editor of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, a paper known for its moderate position on civil rights, reacted to the president's speech. But first, Mr. McGill was asked what his feelings had been as he observed Governor Wallace's defiant stand at the schoolhouse door.
Well, I was ashamed. I understand that a circle had been painted for the governor. He stood in this small painted circle. I thought this was symbolic. There are now left two governors who stand in these small circles, Governor Barnett of Mississippi, Governor Wallace of Alabama. It seemed to me, as a Southerner who has written and watched the Southern political scene for almost half a century now, Governor Wallace revealed a typical bit of demagogic fakery which has been current in the Southern political scene for a long time. He said that he was a sovereign state. This is not true. He said he was acting under constitutional legality guaranteed by the 10th Amendment. This is not true. He said the federal government was interfering with public education. This is not true. There is no sovereign state. We are a federal union, and the Constitution has primacy. So this is a bit of fakery which Southerners have indulged in for years. It sounds good in oratory.
The editor was asked what effect he thought the president's speech would have on people in the South.
Well, I can't help but believe it will have a good effect on everyone except the real extremist diehards. After all, this thing, as the president said, is pretty simple. Do we mean to say that in the southern part of the United States, a Negro citizen can't go in a restaurant, that he can't have a hotel room, that he can't go to a movie, that he can't send his children to school? Surely we don't really mean to say this. And yet here we have a governor inspiring a lot of people to think that they do have a right to do this, and that this is the American way. And I thought it was a little shabby for the governor to speak of the central government. It's his government. To speak of it as if it were some foreign government. I think the president's speech will have a good influence on every thoughtful person.
This afternoon, tensions on the campus at Tuscaloosa had eased considerably as a number of state policemen departed and students attended class. There was, however, one ugly remark directed at Mr. Hood within earshot of reporters. As Mr. Hood entered his sociology class, a tall blonde classmate turned to him and with his hand cupped over his mouth said, quote, "Hood, they got one in Jackson last night," unquote. The student was referring to the rifle assassination in Jackson, Mississippi this morning of 37-year-old Medgar Evers, state field secretary for the NAACP. Struck in the back by a sniper's bullet as he walked from his car to his home shortly after midnight, Mr. Evers, an Army veteran of World War II, died at 1:14 a.m. at University Hospital in Jackson. Dr. A.B. Britton, Mr. Evers' personal physician, said the victim had died of blood loss and internal injuries. According to Dr. Britton, Mr. Evers had expressed a premonition more than once in recent weeks that he might be murdered. 10 days ago, Mr. Evers told a reporter, quote, "If I die, it will be in a good cause. I've been fighting for America just as much as the soldiers in Vietnam," unquote. Here is a portion of that interview.
I've had a number of threatening calls, people calling me saying that they were going to kill me, saying that they were going to blow my home up, and saying that I only had a few hours to live. I remember distinctly one individual calling with a pistol on the other end, and he hit the cylinder, and of course you could hear that it was a revolver. And he said, "This is for you." I said, "Well, whenever my time comes, I'm ready." And well, we get such pranks pretty frequently, but that does not deter us from our goal of first-class citizenship and getting more people registered to vote and doing the things here that a democracy certainly is supposed to espouse and provide for its citizenry.
President Kennedy was informed of the assassination at 7 o'clock this morning. He immediately contacted his brother, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, who assured the president that the FBI was already aiding the Jackson police in the search for the killer. This afternoon, acting White House Press Secretary Andrew Hatcher told newsmen the president was, quote, "shocked and appalled by the barbarity of this act," unquote. Tonight, Medgar Evers, the victim's widow, addressed 500 persons at a mass meeting at the Pearl Street Church in Jackson. Mrs. Evers, who appeared tired but composed, said, quote, "It was Medgar's wish that this Jackson movement would be one of the most successful that this nation has ever known. I am left with a strong determination to try to take up where he left off. I hope that by his death, all here and those who are not here will be able to draw some of his strength, courage, and determination to finish this fight. Nothing can bring Medgar back, but the cause can live on," unquote. In Saigon yesterday, a 66-year-old Buddhist monk put a match to his gasoline-soaked robes and burned to death before hundreds of men, women, and children. The monk, Quang Duc, was protesting the alleged persecution of Buddhists in South Vietnam by President Ngo Dinh Diem's government. Yesterday's horrifying demonstration began with an hour-long service in a pagoda for 8 people killed on May 8th, when riot police and troops broke up a demonstration by 9,000 people in Hue, a city 400 miles north of Saigon. After the service, the monks and nuns filed silently into the street. Quang Duc then sat down at the intersection, and another monk drenched him with gasoline. A few moments later, the monk calmly set himself on fire. He remained upright and silent for at least a minute, and then, with the flames still flickering, he toppled backward. The spectators were mostly stunned into silence, but some wept and several began praying. Many of the monks and nuns, as well as some observers and even a few policemen who were there to control the crowd, prostrated themselves before the burning monk. In a nationwide radio address last night, President Diem appealed for calm, stating, quote, "The state of affairs was moving forward so smoothly when this morning, acting under extremist and false propaganda that sowed doubt about the goodwill of the government, a number of people got intoxicated and caused an undeserved death that made me very sorry. If in the ranks of the Buddhists there are still elements who wrongly think there is any scheme to unjustly crush Buddhism, I declare to you that behind the Buddhists in this country there is still the Constitution, that is, I myself," unquote. This afternoon, Madame Nhu, the bachelor president's sister-in-law who serves as South Vietnam's First Lady, struck a different tone as she offered her blunt reaction to the grisly protest, calling it a quote-unquote barbecue.
What have the Buddhist leaders done comparatively? The only thing they have done, they have barbecued one of their monks, whom they have intoxicated, whom they have abused the confidence, and even that barbecuing was done not even with self-sufficient means, because they used imported gasoline.
Madame Nhu was also reported to have said, quote, "Let them burn, and we shall clap our hands," unquote. I'll have more news for you after this message.
At the touch of your fingertip, you can help protect your home from household germs and destructive mildew. New Lysol Spray Disinfectant helps protect against germs in baby's crib, freshens empty diaper pails. Spray Lysol in the garbage can to control odor. Pet areas, spray Lysol in closets. Basements, wherever there's destructive mold and mildew. Get Lysol Spray, the fast, easy, effective way to destroy household germs, mildew, fungus, odors instantly.
Here again, Joe Rubenstein.
In Washington Monday, President Kennedy, in a commencement address at American University, proposed a quote-unquote strategy of peace to lead the U.S. and the Soviet Union out of the Cold War.
I speak of peace because of the new face of war. Total war makes no sense in an age where a single nuclear weapon contains almost 10 times the explosive force delivered by all the Allied air forces in the Second World War. It makes no sense in an age when the deadly poisons produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of the globe and to generations yet unborn. I realize the pursuit of peace is not as dramatic as the pursuit of war, and frequently the words of the pursuers fall on deaf ears. But we have no more urgent task.
As a first step, Mr. Kennedy announced that high officials of the U.S., Great Britain, and the Soviet Union would soon meet in Moscow as part of a fresh effort to finalize a nuclear test ban treaty.
The conclusion of such a treaty, so near and yet so far, would check the spiraling arms race in one of its most dangerous areas. It would place the nuclear powers in a position to deal more effectively with one of the greatest hazards which man faces in 1963, the further spread of nuclear arms. Our hopes must be tempered with the caution of history, but with our hopes go the hopes of all mankind.
Today, Izvestia, the Soviet national newspaper, printed the unedited text of President Kennedy's speech, an apparent indication that the address had been favorably received at the Kremlin. In New York City tonight, some 10,000 persons gathered around the Rivoli Theater for the premiere of the motion picture Cleopatra. Over 100 policemen were assigned to the Broadway area to control the crowd, the largest call ever assembled for a film opening. The premiere at the 2,400-seat theater was announced earlier this spring at a press conference by Seymour Poe, 20th Century Fox vice president.
The Rivoli Theater in New York has presented to 20th Century Fox Corporation yesterday a certified check, which is the highest sum of money ever paid in the history of the entire entertainment business for any attraction to be exhibited by any means.
The check for $1.25 million was a gesture of faith that Cleopatra, which cost $31 million to produce and nearly bankrupted the studio, would be a hit. The film stars Elizabeth Taylor, who signed on for a record-setting $1 million, and features supporting performances by Richard Burton, Rex Harrison, and Martin Landau. Reviews in the morning papers were mixed, and the reaction of tonight's audience was apparently divided as well. Among the comments overheard from viewers emerging from the theater were, "I think it's a terrific spectacle," and "artistic, but what a bore." During the intermission of the 243-minute feature, a man in the lobby was heard to say, quote, "Good God, $30 million and a real dog," unquote. The film's director, Joseph Mankiewicz, said he expected the film's running time to be cut by as much as 30 minutes after tonight's opening. Sports, right after this.
Follow my rules. Hold matches till cold, then break in two. Crush out smokes. Kill the red really dead. Drown your campfires, and then stir, and drown them again. Please, only you can prevent forest fires.
In the bottom of the 10th inning at Yankee Stadium tonight, home run king Roger Maris shortened his swing and stroked a single through the shortstop hole into left field. And that was all it took to beat the Baltimore Orioles 3-2, as the Bronx Bombers regained first place in the American League, dropping the White Sox to second. With the game tied at 2 in the bottom of the 10th, Bobby Richardson hit a sharp grounder to third that was booted by Brooks Robinson, a Gold Glover for the past 3 years. After Tom Tresh sacrificed and Elston Howard walked, Maris smacked his single, and the game was done. In the Baltimore dressing room, Robinson, who went 2 for 4, found himself cast in the unfamiliar role of explaining a critical error. The third baseman said, quote, "If I get the ball, I get Richardson, but I just didn't make the play. It was over the bag, and I tried to come up with it on the short hop and didn't," unquote. Baltimore manager Billy Hitchcock was asked why he had removed 20-year-old southpaw Dave McNally with 1 out in the 8th and the Birds leading 2-1. Hitchcock replied that he thought McNally was getting tired. When asked if he thought it might damage a young pitcher's confidence to remove him in such a spot, the Baltimore skipper said, quote, "We're not here to develop players, we're here to win ball games," unquote. Yankee manager Ralph Houck was asked recently if there was player development at the major league level or if such instruction was exclusively relegated to the minor leagues.
In the Yankee organization, we naturally look more to development in the minor leagues than we do to winning. I mean, it's nice if you win. I think it's great when you win, but the Yankee organization have always went at that in a more of a development program. And as you say, that is another difference. In the minor leagues, the manager has to do more teaching. He not only is a manager, he's definitely an instructor. Whereas up here, that's wonderful, but I mean, here I have great coaches like Crissetti and Hegan and Sane, and Moses is a batting instructor, and now Berra, and it certainly makes your job a lot easier up here as far as the instructing and the teaching. Of course, these players are farther advanced, and it's the little things that you're looking for up here.
There was a switch at the top of the National League standings tonight as well, as the Dodgers regained first place by destroying the 9th-place Houston Colt 45s 9-1 at Dodger Stadium. Although the Colts had 10 hits tonight, Johnny Padres pitched out of numerous jams to score his first victory since May 21st. The 30-year-old southpaw, now in his 11th year with the Dodgers, struck out 9 and did not walk a batter. Reigning MVP Maury Wills improved his average to .323 as the Dodgers shortstop smacked 4 hits in 5 trips. Maury also swiped his 15th base. Sandy Koufax, who currently sports an ERA of 1.77, goes gunning for the Colts tomorrow night when he will face Houston right-hander Bob Bruce. And that, for this evening, completes our look at the latest news on this Wednesday, June 12th, 1963. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day tomorrow.
This has been your Evening Report, a roundup of the latest news with Joe Rubenstein.